It is indeed my pleasure to tell you today in this hall, you have been able to host 35 of the 54 countries, capital cities represented on the continent. I think that really went all.
Today represents the fourth installment of the African Capital Cities Sustainability Forum, a continental platform that provides us all with a shared interest or an opportunity of shared interest in a prosperous, sustainable, and resilient continent. I said something and I'm going to repeat it again. Africa is not begging anymore. Africa is ready to do it for itself.
Because the issues we're facing on the continent are very challenging, but we can tackle them head on if we work together, as the executive mayor has said. We are hoping that during the course of the next 2-3 days, they will come out with some solutions, with some answers to those challenges.
But let me first take this opportunity of thanking the City of Tshwane and the mayor in particular for hosting this very prestigious event. The theme speaks to the need for all leaders to listen to the aspirations of our people. That means we need to do things right. Let's plan before we forge ahead. When the prospects of the fourth industrial revolution are discussed, African city leaders should take note. This time, Africa should not be left behind as she has been in the last 3 industrial revolutions.
So the response from the young entrepreneurs was obviously one of elation, because it gives them an opportunity to engage with the city, an opportunity that they won't always get on their own.
Given the fact that when you want to do urban design and management, you need to do what we call the integrated development approach.
A city which was planned for 300,000 people now houses 1,055,964.
Abuja was planned initially for a total population of 350,000, covering phase 1 to 3. But as I speak to you today, Abuja is harboring over 5 million.
And we made it very clear, and we gave the very, very strong message that municipalities are not part of the political division.
Can you tell us about the initiatives that have been implemented to stimulate food production?
So we used a PPP arrangement, public-private partnership, in terms of delivering the water services and sewer sanitation.
A lot of environmental problems. So since it's a government-owned company, it has a lot of capabilities. They managed to build this large number of housing units in a period of time.
I'm happy to say that I come from a beautiful country and with a lot of sunshine, as you say. And so we have a policy to promote renewable energy in Seychelles.
Setting up policies and regulations which are conducive to the private sector. Because as policymakers, we've come up with policies which can attract the private sector.
Well, I don't believe there is anyone who have lost. I believe we are all winners. Why do I say that? As the city of Gaborone, we believe that by moving from code that we know has been produced in our country, and we've been entirely dependent on it, either from South Africa or from Botswana, now moving to a renewable energy through solar.
In Port Louis, only about 2,000 buses transit Port Louis daily. Therefore, in line with the road decongestion program, the central government, under the leadership of the Prime Minister, Pravin Jagnnath, decided to come up with the first Metro Express project in 2016.
Par la pauvreté en déficit énergétique, mais parler en deux temps. Le premier temps, c'est la politique du gouvernement pour parer à ce problème.
A pergunta que me foi feita é em relação à atual produção de energia versus a capacidade futura que será instalada para o país. Pois.
Hello, Peter. How are you doing today? I'm very well. How are you? Awesome. Thank you, sir. Enjoy it, guys.
It's really a pleasure to be here today and to officially declare this meeting as a Talanoa Dialogue meeting.
Cities, as we know, are responsible for 70% of global energy emissions. Therefore, city action is vital to achieving the reductions we need for the 1.5-degree pathway.
Nice to know that our mayor is very technically inclined.
The departure point is to say, what are the key fundamentals when you're talking about financing of projects, especially bankable projects? Now, as a City of Tshwane, there's 4 pillars in which we looked at when we were putting together the developmental plan. And that is, we looked at the spatial transformation, we look at the economic transformation, we look at the ecological transformation.
Okay, thank you very much. I must say I felt a little bit jealous, considering all of the initiatives.
Krish, I think the first thing is that, which is important for achieving this, is the unity of purpose between your politicians and officials. Because without that, you can have all the other fundamentals in place, but you will not achieve anything.
We have been hugely affected by urbanization, and the population growth of Dar es Salaam is huge.
Je voudrais dire que notre municipalité, qui est la ville de Dakar, a un important programme d'investissement. Tout d'abord dire que nos municipalités sont régies.
So these cities have prioritized planning. So these projects that they are looking for money for, they're not just projects that are just being dreamt, just come up with a project. But they have, first of all, set the framework. So the C40 cities are using data, credible data, to actually develop a solid climate action plan.
Because when you talk about bankability, part of bankability is how do I make my money back? How do I ensure that the projects that you want to invest in, the projects that you want to run, will ensure that at the end of the day I get my money back? Now, we're not into making money as cities. We are there to provide services.
And I think all the cities can agree we are all facing the same challenges. You know, there's issues of urbanization, there's issues of limited funding, poverty, inequality.
Climate change poses a threat, ladies and gentlemen, to economic growth and long-term prosperity of countries throughout Africa. Changing rainfall patterns, rising sea levels, and higher temperatures are already affecting food security, agricultural production, water availability, and public health, amongst others.
So we are running a third project, which we call resilient housing, where we train our residents on techniques on how to build housing without using mangroves, but also using techniques that will make their housing more resilient to climate change.
In the past 10 years, from 1999 up to 2008, in 10 years, the rise in the water level was around, the figure says around, I think, 2.1 millimeter. And in the past years, it's been less than 5, it's been 3.8 millimeter. So for a little island like Mauritius in the Indian Ocean, this rise is quite consequential.
The challenges we have in regard to climate change are pollution, especially from the neighboring flower growing farms, industrial waste from neighboring areas, and the human waste.
L'extraction des sables marins, c'est très fréquent et qu'il est important de mettre en place des actions, non seulement de répression, mais aussi des amendes par rapport à ces agissements. Également, nous avons aussi adopté.
Temos de trabalhar também em respeito ao aproveitamento.
Et dans les communes interconnectées, au niveau de ce que nous appelons les grands axes routiers, les voies express. Nous avons déjà les problèmes climatiques qui nous touchent très durement actuellement. Et en ce moment que je vous parle, et déjà dans la ville de Kuapip,
On essaie de voir comment on peut régler les catastrophes qui arrivent au plus vite dans notre île.
Has involved setting up a plant for waste management. In this one, however, we see that it is to be understood mainly in terms of a chain from generation to management.
One of our problems is waste management.
Neste momento são Tomé e Príncipe, são duas ilhas compostas.
Moreover, has struggled with rural-urban migration, overpopulation, and urban employment, sanitation, and has become one of the major problems facing the city vis-à-vis waste management.
La ville de N'Djamena a préparé des projets de la ceinture verte. C'est-à-dire que N'Djamena a pu bien préparer.
Firstly, we do need to say to each other that we are a continent in transition. We have a huge, unprecedented opportunity to move towards a resilient and sustainable future through our cities, through the work that our cities are doing. But we also face many challenges in this process. But we do have this opportunity to put us on a trajectory of growth and prosperity for our urban community of the future.
What sort of projects should we be seeking finance for? What sort of targets should we want to achieve with this money? And what sort of projects would accelerate really green growth in African cities?
And it seems like most of the municipalities around Africa have forgotten that in the boardrooms today, and certainly in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll have 16 and 15 and 14-year-olds holding seats in those boards, because the direction of technology has made them capable to speak at that level, to engage at that level. The only problem that we will have as the older citizens is understanding that their sense of dress and their sense of speech might not be what we are used to. But it is what it is. It is what the world that we are now living in.
There is no way we can talk about Africa rising without the recognition of the key role of cities in development. Today, it has become a little bit more complicated because local governments face a new round of challenges, including those brought about by globalization, the global financial crisis, increasing recognition of the impact of climate change, as well as migration and urbanization.
What we concluded in this report that was launched yesterday is that there are huge untapped opportunities within the waste sector. But this requires a change in paradigm, a paradigm shift, where we start seeing waste as a resource, where we embrace and incorporate recycling, and we see the social and technological innovation possibilities around waste.
For many of you who live in South Africa, and for those who are not from South Africa, you may not be aware, but we're going through a bit of a crisis at the moment in terms of land grabs. People are fed up with employment, lack of employment, fed up with the lack of housing and poverty, and are actually physically occupying land spontaneously in order to put pressure on government to deliver. So precisely how we deal with that in a sustainable way is clearly a massive challenge, not just for South Africa, but for other parts of the continent. And my simple message today is that we need to plan with people and not for people. We need to take people on board, otherwise they will act in ways which are counterproductive.
So it's very important to minimize, to mitigate these pollutants, because if we do that, we avoid global warming, we actually avoid premature deaths, and also avoid crop losses.
And the most important part about this area is that all of the food there is grown because there's an aquifer underneath the farmland.
On the left-hand side, if we continue doing what we're doing, then the blue areas is where you're likely to see flooding from sea surge and rising sea levels. And even if we go to extreme containment, even if we completely change, the momentum is still going to result on the right-hand side in those areas where some form of sea barrier is going to have to be built, or you retreat from those areas.
Climate-related events account for 85% of all natural disaster events and 81% of all natural disaster-related deaths in South Africa.
The cities also came together and shared very interesting from the global network. Rio de Janeiro shared, perhaps just to look at the previous slides, how else can we get there as South Africa in terms of reducing our carbon emissions?
Sustainable construction involves a commitment to attaining 3 pillars: economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, and social sustainability.
We also, as part of because it was a cradle-to-grave life cycle assessment, we obviously had to look at demolition and disposal. This was a desktop study, and I must admit there's not a lot of formal information in terms of demolition and disposal in this country. What we could find was that 36% of clay bricks are estimated to be recycled. Now, we as producers know that it is a lot more. There's a huge informal recycling operation happening at these dump sites and on building sites, whereby informal people go and they would recycle and sell the bricks out of hand, and there's absolutely no record about that.
Basically, before any construction company has arrived on a site like this, there's a whole range of activities that could take years before this site has been approved by the authorities. So obviously, the client or the developer generally doesn't understand these things. Let's say Old Mutual. What do they understand about these things? They'll get someone to assist them in putting this plan together. So the client will then obviously approach a consultancy, and they will analyze the situation, and they will determine what we call NEMA-listed activities in South Africa.
So when we talk about adaptive, we're largely talking about, for the longest time in the South African green economy, it's been a climate mitigation story. I think the common thought and the common discussions that have been coming out of the conference is there's a very clear understanding that we're now in adaptation phase. We saw Cape Town almost ran out of water. We saw not just Cape Town, the Eastern Cape as well. Other regions of the country, KZN is also just one of the places in the country that are facing one of the most extreme conditions of climate change. So now we know we're no longer talking a mitigation story, we're talking an adaptation story.
And this sort of talks also to the great confusion about our relationship with nature and architecture and landscape and urbanism. And there's this big dialogue that's going on now between landscape urbanists and new urbanists and all these people. But it comes down to the role of nature in the city, this argument. What is it and what should it be? And it's this interrelationship of the landscape and the city that has undergone very formal and philosophical transformation over hundreds of years.
And essentially what this says is for manufacturing to be competitive, it has to have access to the resources, water, energy, land, people, air, and you've got to be able to move those materials around from where they come to where they get manufactured and where they go to market.
Sinataki